He's going to show up. He's late because of this gender discrimination. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back, I'd like to say, since we're on the penultimate day. Welcome back to the home of sustainable agriculture of the Americas. This is the second year we're at the COP. The purpose of this pavilion is so that we promote the importance of agriculture at the UN food system, at the UN Climate Change Conference. I'm delighted to see many friends in the audience, and we have joining us the token member of the male species on this panel. Welcome, Alex. We've been working on the issue of sustainable livestock for a number of years now, and it's important that we have this panel and that we have all of you to talk, not just to ourselves, but to the rest of the COP about the importance of livestock and how we're part of the solution for climate change. And I think this panel is going to get into a lot of that, so I am going to pass the microphone over to our moderator from the Dairy Farmers of America and a Wisconsin Badger. So despite that personal defect, I'd like to pass the floor to Jay. Jay.
He's not wrong. I want to start with just a couple of quick comments, but I want to progress very quickly to the panel because it is a really strong panel, and we want to get time for them to give input, but also for you to think about questions. So the first comment is there will be time for questions at the end, but only 2 or 3. So when you have one and you really want it, get ready to raise your hand fast as we approach the end. 2 things for me just as a context. One thing that strikes me in the couple of COPs I've been to and the evolution over the last few years is if you think back to climate change, we're only about a generation into before it even was a term. We're only 20 or 25 years ago when it popped up, and it was at that point still so vague, nobody knew what exactly it was, but some people were concerned about it. And then it kind of got changed to, well, what we're really talking about is global warming. Still a bit vague, but it's getting warmer, we can tell. And then we can start to measure how that temperature has changed by drilling to ice cores. And now we can actually measure and say, yes, indeed, the world is getting warmer. We're starting to get more concerned and more specific. And it's actually greenhouse gases that are the worry. And in fact, things are getting so tight, it's short-term greenhouse gases. The reality is right now, if you find out where we're at today, it's methane, methane, methane. And methane is fossil fuels, which have proven too hard to solve, and agriculture, rice and livestock. Headline is we moved from something vague that some people thought was a concern to something where the people believe more and more the world's on fire and the challenge, the solution sits around agriculture and livestock. We're going to come out of this as a hero. We're going to come out of this as a scapegoat, but we are in that issue now we have to embrace. The second thing is a perception walking around here is that there's lots of activity, right? We're in the beehive. But almost everybody is still in their own cell, having the same conversation amongst themselves. And the opportunity here, the priority here is to figure out how is it that we can cooperate and coordinate better across agriculture, across the livestock sector to get to that sustainability position. But I want to start by getting the cell part out of the way. So in interest of time and making sure I don't butcher names, we're going to have self-introductions, introduce yourself, your role, and maybe spend a few minutes talking about what you're doing in your role, in your sector, to focus on sustainable livestock. So, Secretary Ross, I'll start with you, please.
That's easy. Karen Ross, I'm Secretary of the Department of Food and Agriculture for California. And we have several programs that are still fairly new for us. But as a state, we are a state that passed a mandate for methane emission reductions, including setting goals for reducing livestock methane. And our dairy families in particular have really leaned into this and are leading the way on that. I will say our beef producers are saying, you guys go first. But it's partly because of the way in which we produce milk in California. It is a very efficient way, and it has made California the #1 dairy producing state in the United States of America. And we have, when we helped pass that legislation and the administration helped lead that through the legislature, we made a commitment to livestock and to agriculture that we will partner with you, that this is a big transition. Setting a goal of 40% reductions below 2013 is a big intimidating thing. And so far, we've been able to maintain that commitment by providing incentive dollars. This is where we want you to go. We've taken the time to work with all of the stakeholders to craft a program that we think could work. And it is a program that has two elements to it. It has dairy digesters, anaerobic digestion, which can generate renewable electricity, renewable natural gas. Someday I hope it's helping on the hydrogen side because that'll make you even more of heroes. And we allow for partnerships with professional dairy digester developers because dairy farmers like to take care of their animals and grow the crops. And it's very important to make this thing work and to make it generate a revenue stream to help keep them in business, that we were able to set up a program to do that. I will also say the addition of low carbon fuel standard and being able to take renewable natural gas into fleets of trucks and buses has been a real bonus in that. So in one realm, you're already the heroes, but I won't go into, county ordinances and other types of things. But our methane reduction program has been a huge way that we've been able to partner with dairy. We also include alternative manure management practices because not every dairy is of the scale or wants to do that. And that's been another way of a connected economy of generating, like, here's a nitrogen replacement from a more organic source. So those are just two things that we're doing to really, and it's been over $300 million over the last decade that we've been able to invest.
Oh, thank you, and a fantastic story, and actual from development to execution to results. Maybe just one quick question for you. How much of success has been based on the fact you put policies and compliance requirements in? There was a bit of a stick in front of the carrot.
So it is a stick. However, based on working with the industry and crafting legislation would pass, the regulatory hammer was put out for 2025, right? 2024. Oh my God, time flies when you're having fun. And because we're more than halfway to our target, especially on methane and dairy digesters, I think that probably what we'll be looking at for the requirement of regulations is more about reporting and monitoring. However, they're very anxious for enteric fermentation solutions, which the rest of the world is as well. So we're very hopeful that the first product in the United States that will be registered for the claim will be out of FDA in the first quarter. We're also hopeful that we will continue to have the funding for a pilot program to really start to do the pilots and collect the data, working with the dairy farmers to be able to be a part of that solution as well.
Fantastic. Minister Cardoza, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
This is working.
It is.
So how hard to introduce myself after you? Okay, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much to ICA for the invitation. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today. I will briefly introduce myself to the participants. I'm Araceli Cardozo. I work at the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock of Paraguay in the General Directorate of Planning, who is the dependence who does the policy for the sector. It's a really main role in the institution. And especially I'm in charge of all the commercial and environmental issues related to agricultural products. So I have the commercial vision on all this process. So that's pretty
Yeah. And anything that you're specifically focused on now to deal with livestock sustainability? Like programs or work that is particularly focused on for you?
My institution, like we have a lot of initiative. If I have the time to explain all of them, it will take me like 5 minutes, but I can introduce to you. But first, to answer that question, I would like to context what Paraguay do. I would like to comment that Paraguay livestock production it's environmentally sustainable. In that sense, it is worth mentioning that Paraguay has a participation of only 0.1% in total GNG emissions. And in addition to that, it has more than 7 million hectares of prairies and pastures that constitute net carbon sinks. So for more than 10 years, Paraguay has been positioned among the top 10 meat exporters in the world, selling to more than 55 countries, and has a great potential to be a global benchmark for sustainable meat, thanks to its production based mainly on natural fields without any additive or growth promoters, promoting in that way the efficient use of natural resources and their conservation, and being another option to generate carbon credits. So that's
Building off what already works to make it better. Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, I'm Alex Peterson. I am a full-time dairy farmer from Trenton, Missouri, North Missouri. Farm with my parents, my oldest brother, and my niece. And if any of them reach out to you, I was here working today and not at the beach or anything fun. Yeah, this is a vacation day. Great to be with you. So aside from the farming hat, I am also the chairman of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. And from that perch, alongside a few roles with DMI, our checkoff organization for dairy, we focus quite a bit of energy and resources on paving a way forward for sustainable practices. And that's, we are a convener between industry, obviously governance institutions through universities and that sort of thing, and research, and obviously upstream from us, which where eventually you get to the customers, and finding ways to make investments and scale things down. You know, 20 years ago, you guys remember helping your neighbor move the first flat screen TV into their basement? Do you remember that, Jay, when they called you to help?
It's a TV.
Yeah. And now we all have a flat screen in our pocket. So the same kind of principle. It takes a little bit, and I understand the beef guys maybe a smart strategy on let us go through the door first and get bloody. But the beauty of dairy is we are all of those things. We happen to be an industry that's dairy, beef, crop, forage. We kind of check a lot of boxes, and that, I think, makes us kind of a natural unifier in the space. And I think us finding ways to invest smartly into practices and procedures that work and, you know, that maybe aren't economically sustainable at the moment, but we can work to get them there. I think having a good idea going forward with that in mind is a big part of what we're doing on the sustainability front, because, you know, convening all of those sources I was talking about, it's going to take a combination of all those to have the resources we need to do this on the onset to get it scaled up. And I think that's an important part of what we do pre-competitively at USDEC and promotion in general.
So as a farmer, the way you described USDEC and the activities and the convener role, you're a dairy farmer and a cat herder.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about the livestock.
And depending on the day, one is easier.
Josefina, if I could ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Josefina Eisel. I'm the regional director for GRSV for Latin America. I'm based in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And yeah, my work at GRSV started 7 years ago, just starting to gather national roundtables in Latin America. GRSV started about 12 years ago by setting the definition through the principles and criteria about what sustainable beef was. At that time, we were kind of proactively trying to define what was sustainable beef, taking into account that there was a lot of talking about deforestation, animal welfare. So we say, let's define at global level what's sustainable beef. But then we realized it was very hard to have one-size-fits-all definition. So we said, okay, let's start with the national roundtables, where based on the global strategy and the global definition, they can define according to the context, according to the challenges and opportunities. what was sustainable beef for each of the countries. So we've been working on that. We started with the principles and criteria and then having that at local level. And then 2 years ago, we have defined global goals on climate, on nature positive, on animal welfare, and now we're working on a social goal. And again, the goal is for global, at global level, and then each country has to make their own ambition, their own commitment on how are they going to contribute on this aspect. So this is how we work. We try to go from global to local, and it's very important for us, the farmer's voice. We bring the farmer's voice and to start dialogues among the sector, the industry, that before it was not happening. Just producers talking to the slaughterhouses in common definition of what sustainable beef is. So yeah, that's what we are working.
And engaging in the farmers and talking about the processes to build them up, how well informed are they? How much is it they need help to get there? Or how much is you first have to tell them what it is you're trying to achieve and why?
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges, just to bring everyone up to the same level on knowledge, on the discussion. Like everybody were kind of at first a bit defensive, saying I'm doing things right. So saying, okay, we are not trying to put you on the spot and saying they're doing things wrong, but let's start to construct together. So usually when we set a round table, it takes 2 years until they all get into have trust to each other. And yeah, and now once they find like a common point of interest, the solutions, the transformation happens very fast. So,
Yeah,
but it
fantastic.
takes time.
Constance.
Hi, yes, I'm Constance Coleman. I'm president and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association, and we represent over 75% of the feed manufactured in the United States, but also the feed ingredients and additives. And I want to touch on that one for a very specific reason, as well as manufacturers of equipment and health products for animals. And at AFIA, several years ago, we noticed that when people were talking about feed, they were automatically going to producers of feedstuffs, so corn and soybean, without recognizing that there was this whole industry there that, quite frankly, is the common denominator for everything, for livestock, for poultry, for aqua, all of the animal protein that's out there. We're a common denominator. So we said, well, wait a minute. We think there might be some opportunities here for us to be able to engage and really look at how do we get to that sustainable picture, and how can we help the livestock sector do that? And when you think about 40 to 60%, Jay, of emissions are attributed to the feed, depending on your species group, coming and us being engaged in Central, it was really quite important. So we initially went out and we talked to our members, which what it's kind of struck me as funny is I think every day and every panel we've heard, how about listening and having some conversations, right? Which is a little to your earlier point today. So we went and we talked to our members, but more importantly, we also reached out to our customers. So we're buying feedstuffs from farmers, but more importantly, we're selling to farmers. And we are very cognizant of what their goals are and what their objectives are. So how can we help them as a feed industry get there? And it's exciting. I mean, Jay, the potential is unbelievable. When you think about improving overall animal health, the performance of the gut, getting better feed conversion, reducing animal mortality, and then add those additives and those incredible innovations that are out there. If only we could get them labeled in the United States, Secretary Ross. I'm excited about that first quarter product. I think you and I are both talking about the same one. But there's a whole host of products behind that. Once we get that regulatory pathway and runway cleared, we're really going to be able to have direct, measurable impacts on that. And I will tell you, it's going to be a lot faster and a lot more traceable to work through your feed supplier or your feed ingredient supplier to be able to track and monitor some of these potential changes. So for that reason, we're working with non-traditional partners, WWF, the Nature Conservancy, EDF, folks across the board, really to try to maximize the performance of that animal's gut, and we can make huge strides when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions.
Passion. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Give me two questions related somewhat. One is, every place we look around the world in terms of livestock, one of the limiting factors and or opportunities is feed, and it's across all sectors, as you mentioned before. If I look at it in terms of where you're trying to get to, why is something that I would assume is almost in every case a no regrets step, right? Make your cows healthier, make them more efficient. Why is there still so much space to improve? Why haven't we already taken that up?
Well, a lot of it is we're learning. We're understanding how the microbiome in the animal works. And we're really learning how to tap into how we optimize the performance of that gut, not only for production efficiency, but also for overall health of the animal. And so the knowledge that we're getting to and understanding that microbiome, and how do we actually tap into the incredible attributes of natural products all around the world, plus some of the innovation that's happening in the area of synthetic products as well, which can be very effective. We're really starting to make that connection to be able to basically give them a better nutritional profile in some ways, and more personalized nutritional profile than even people have. So that's what's really exciting. We're going to be able to match up the genetic performance of that animal with the function of the microbiome to really maximize that. And we're making that progress because we're learning more.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment at the end, and we talk about what we need to do to make livestock more sustainable. And we talk a little bit about food loss and waste, but when you think about how we sell food, we're just happy to be at gross protein. Right, and at animals, we're at amino acids and microbiome, and it's amazing if you can apply that to humans, what the benefit would be. I want to go back around once more before we hit with questions, because this is about how we work together, better understanding what we're all doing individually. So maybe, if you like, you can choose one of two ways to answer this. One would be, what are you doing now that you think is already that kind of coordination? Where are you working cross-sector? Whether it's across country lines or geographies or different livestock sectors in your own area. Or if you like, you're king of the world for a day. You get to decide what cooperation, what coordination we should do. If you could pick one that you could force to happen that you think will have the biggest impact, what would it be? So I'll go back to you, Secretary, to start.
I'm sure I'm the only one that's going to talk about this. The narrative. How do we help those that are several generations removed from the farm? How do we help our eaters who take for granted the health and the availability and the pricing of what's in the case? I'm in a state that loves direct government by initiative, and there is a very strong perception of what animals on the land are, and it's not accurate. It may be from 50-year ago, before our practices were so improved and we became like so in tune with all of that. If there's one thing I could change, it was having the people, including the neighbors, really understand it, which is saying a lot because people live lives. But there is a desperate need to take all of this data, all of these great stories, and make it something that's meaningful to the people who are either they are customers or they are talking to moms of children who have a perception of what's right or not. How do we do that? Because it's a powerful, powerful story to be able to provide nutrition to people with care for the earth and the people who work for us. And there's a lot that gets missed, and I wish if there's one thing I could do, it would be on helping to dispel some of the perceptions that are not helpful for our industry, especially in a state like California.
It's almost impossible to believe the gap between the quality of the story we have to tell and how poorly we tell it.
People they really want to hear from. He's trying to make a living, and he and all the she's that are in this business. But I cannot underscore how important it is. But it's also, it shouldn't just be the people in the production side. It's finding those non-traditional allies that are also at the table and can testify to the power of what these folks are doing for all of us.
Well said. Minister Cardozo.
Yeah, sure. For Paraguay, the successful formula was for sure the private and public alliance to have the farmers not aside, to have them in the main seat when policymakers are making decisions for the future of the sectors. So that was the successful formula for us. We have a lot of initiative, such as publics, also private. The one was, they were mentioning the global sustainable livestock roundtable that allow us to create a national meat roundtable for sustainability, and where it's led by the private sector. And the public institutions are being observers in this process, actually, because they have a lot of members in this roundtable that are also farmers, public institution, is the academia part of it. It's also NGOs part of them, and of course international cooperation. So the public sector is just accompanying this process and let them lead all the work. We are working together. That's the main message that we want to say. We cannot be apart or differentiate from the private sector. So for us, this was the successful formula, not only for promote sustainable production, also for create consensus to the consumers that what we are doing as a country, as with a great potential to be a benchmark of global benchmark of sustainable meat, and also to be a national pride for them, what Paraguay is doing, and it's right, and it's environmentally sustainable. So that's how.
Listening and getting everybody involved early seems so logical, but is so rare. So congratulations. Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, so to mention a quick one, I mean, things like Pathway to Net Zero, Greener Cattle Initiative, the Climate Smart Commodity Grants, things where we are projects, as I kind of mentioned in the intro, that we are really working with commercial business, with private enterprise, up and down the stream. Those are crucially important to what we're trying to do. The fun one that I want to talk about, though, is as I've got to go on trade mission trips. When you're the chair, you kind of get to give a little, push to the rudder. And one of the things that we've done, I think, has shown tremendous potential is, when we went to Mexico, we met with the Mexican dairy farmers. Costa Rica the same way, Chile the same way, and IECA is kind of a great forum for that. But meeting them one-on-one and building camaraderie and having them understand that we are there to collaborate on building demand for better nutrition, and that us helping their market grow is the best thing for their dairy business, it's the best thing for our dairy business, and most importantly, it's the best thing for the consumers in that market. And us collaborating helps a lot on the marketing side, but more so than anything, helps us on the production side. You've been around and seen farmers talk to each other. It's a unique and wonderful thing, and scary sometimes, probably, Secretary Ross, I would say. But that kind of collaboration across markets, across countries, across cultures is going to be an important step. Maybe not exactly right now today, even though I think it is to a degree. But as this progresses, those are the connections that are going to be important for having that trust to share good information, to share good best practices back and forth. And I think that's going to help raise all boats, because you talk about learning and listening from each other, listening to each other. That starts with understanding that you care and understanding that you're on the same team. And that's not inherently sensed, I think. That's something you have to work to build as far as any relationship.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really amazing point. If you go around the world and scratch a farmer at the core, they're all very, very similar. Not just in how they think, not just in how they act, but in what they believe, and their commitment to the land, their commitment to what they're doing. And if you can harness that power together, if you can get them all thinking at least kind of the same way, how amazing is that? Excellent point. Josefina.
Well, they said a lot of what I was going to say. So, no, I think something to add, because I agree on everything that has been said. We also kind of brought together NGOs that sometimes they were kind of pointing them out that you are the problem, and to work together with farmers. That was like in Paraguay was one of the cases, Brazil, in most of the countries where we work, it was not common to find common solution with the NGOs. The other ones are more for the protest, and the other ones are come with proposals for solutions. So I think that was a big accomplishment of having civil society, farmers, industry working together in one space looking for a solution. Another one is we are starting, for example, a new roundtable in Uruguay, and Uruguay has made a lot of progress on this area. So what can we contribute that has not been done? And when talking to researchers, to INIA, that is a National Research Institute, they say we have a lot of knowledge, a lot of data, but we do some extension to farmers, but the private sector is not really implementing that. So we really need to work with the supply chain of these companies to really bring that data and bring that technology, that knowledge for them to implement. So through these kind of initiatives, we can all sit together and say, okay, you don't need to invent the wheel. This has been already been discussed and done. And then finally, it's what they said, data and the narrative. I think that's very important, and we still have a long way to go. But we at GRSV, we have a new challenge that we are going to start reporting progress, because before it was a nice narrative, but now we need the data. And it's a huge challenge because the data is all spread out everywhere. So we need the research institute, we need to run some tests in areas that in some countries, maybe there's not enough data. So I think that's also what we are trying to collaborate for this transformation.
Yeah, fantastic. And the idea of bringing NGOs and others in without saying where they sit in the conversation, the age-old adage, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. If you're not listening to them as well, and you're not finding solutions that they'll understand, you're not really finding solutions.
Exactly.
Constance.
You know, I mentioned collaborations before, but I'll emphasize that again, and that's collaborations within the livestock sector, within the agricultural community, obviously. These are our customers, these are our partners, and we're in it for the long haul with them. But to the NGO point, you know, I think we're very selective. We look at NGOs that are solution-oriented. If they're not solution-oriented, then it's hard to find that common ground and that desire to solve the problem. So that's something we certainly do. So in collaborating, whether it's on research, or whether it's educational activities or it's looking at new data and technology, we really are focusing on 4 different areas. The first one is ration innovation, and how do we pave the way from both a regulatory perspective, but also the ability to get these tools in farmers and ranchers' hands. Things that, everything from how we formulate a diet and put a ration together, to modifying feedstuffs and the processing of those feedstuffs, to looking at enzymes, synthetic amino acids, pre, post, and probiotics. I didn't know there were so many biotics, post, and probiotics. So all of that really exciting stuff is happening, and that's one of the 4 prongs. The second is circularity. And circularity in the biological systems is hard. It's really hard to do. But when you consider that 80% of the food consumed by animals is not consumable by humans, that's a heck of a way to actually access resources and turn it into something that is consumable by humans, and that's really exciting. We feed everything from almond hulls to citrus pulp to bakery waste to whey products. So it's a lot of things that otherwise would not have a home. And so that has to be factored in. But how do we talk about that? How do we communicate that? And how do we get people to understand the complexity of that system, right? So that's another area we're working on. Another one is responsible sourcing. So understanding where you're pulling in product, what kinds of products you're pulling in, and how do you make that a vehicle to get to a lower environmental footprint. And then the 4th one is one that's really hard, and we've been talking about it for years, and that's feedstuff production. So that is, you know, working with farmers directly in the field as they produce that feedstuff. That's a longer term proposition, and one that we've been working on for a long time and will continue to work. on for a long time. If I could wave my magic wand,
Yes,
Jay,
please.
you asked me that
Wave away,
question.
wave away.
My problem is my wand would be very busy because there's so many things, right?
Only good one.
But one is getting the food and agricultural system to understand it's a system. And that as a system, it needs to be interconnected. It needs to communicate internally. It needs to share information up and down the supply chain. Because until we do that, we're not going to be able to optimize both food security, food or nutritional security, as well as sustainability.
We hang together or we will almost certainly hang. Now's the window for questions, and while you're thinking about them really intently, I noticed that on the front here we said connecting farmers, scientists, business, and public sector, but apparently we don't have a scientist on our panel, so is there a scientist in the room who might have a question? What luck.
Not planted. Allison Thompson, I'm with the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research in the U.S., and we don't have a scientist on the panel. They may not identify that way, but I can tell that you all are working with great science advisors and listening carefully to what they say, because we've heard a lot of that. So at FAR, we put together public-private partnerships. So we work with industry, we work with farm organizations, we work with state and local governments, we work across the agriculture sector to form those public-private partnerships and really catalyze investment in agricultural research. So really fantastic hearing what you all are up to. One thing, this is my first COP, I've been here a week, and so one just reflection is I hear a lot about action and speed and accelerating and moving forward and all of these things, which as a global citizen is like very encouraging. As a scientist in this space, it gives me a little bit of pause of like, okay, agriculture is incredibly diverse. We're working with very diverse systems. We need different solutions for different farming systems, for different species, for across the board. And one of the things we've started to do a little bit at FAR is experimenting with research paired with implementation. So moving away from the model of just scientists doing science and handing that over to a sector to act on, but in fact doing projects where implementation is going on of climate smart practices, and we're pairing that with research to study those. So we're achieving something, but then also achieving even greater impact with the science that then gives us an idea of how well those are working in what contexts and so on. So I guess the question to you all, to any of you who are interested, is really how you might be working with scientists and some of the implementation work you're doing. If you're seeing good collaborations there within your sector, if there's anything you'd like to highlight on that, I'd love to hear about it.
Does anyone want to take a bite at that question? Who likes scientists?
Secretary Ross.
Say we have to be based on science, and we're constantly looking for the best scientists in a particular subject matter, and not just in California. We think globally. So our most recent experience on how important this is in May of this year, we did a global state of the science on enteric fermentation. We had a number of scientists from around the globe who were in the room with us, either as presenters or in the audience because of the interest in the topic, or on webinar. And so that's a way for us on Climate Smart Ag, is to really tap into all the countries we visited and others that know the state of the science on that. But I would also say, not so much on the dairy digester side, but as we do this pilot program on enteric fermentation, that's got a very strong, these are going to be pilots. We're pretty sure it's all going to work the way it's supposed to, but we're going to learn a lot about the different settings that they're being used in. And then lastly, I would say we fund demonstration projects on our healthy soils, which has a direct connection to our cows for very obvious reasons that I don't think I need to explain to anybody here. And we have, from the beginning, funded demonstration projects, including extra funding if you have a component to collect the data with scientists to capture that and just fill out the field of what we're learning, because it's farmers that are implementing the practices, but the researchers are there to collect the data on what they believe is going to help inform other farmers in different settings.
We also are working a lot with universities. We support UC Davis, the CLEAR Center, and the work that's being done to understand how different feed additives perform when it comes to methane emission. We're doing a lot of work with Iowa State University. We are partnering with the Nature Conservancy on a grant with Iowa State University, as well as, of course, Kansas. State University, a lot of the work there with the feed mills. But we also are, reaching out. Cornell is also doing some work in the area of emissions. So we're really working closely with those that have some of that expertise. We can go down to some other universities that are doing a lot with LCAs. In our efforts to harmonize LCAs, so LCAs can actually talk to one another and mean something. That's pretty important as well. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work jointly, working. National Pork Producers is the checkoff is funding a project that we're doing, looking at different criteria and measurements. So yeah, that is a hugely important part of it. And as the secretary said, it's got to be based. We've got to have the scientific evidence, and we need to know what reality is. It's not like we're trying to prove it to anybody else. We need the information to make sure that works well. And I would be remiss if I didn't credit the scientists and all of our member companies that are doing amazing work and making sure that we have a fair, robust regulatory program that assures efficacy of some of these types of products is very important as well.
I would just add, Jay, I think one of the critical points at the beginning of that comment and question was the successes that they're talking about all have farmers at the onset, at the beginning. And I think that's a critical part to making sure we're not just talking about theoretical science, but actually science that we can put into practice and utilize, which is critical.
Excellent point. Other questions? Finger waving back here.
So, Klaus Fuglsang, I'm the Chief Science Officer at Novozymes, and there are actually solutions in the market when it comes to probiotics. Now, my question is more, you mentioned something around the regulatory pathway. I mean, what is the appetite to really dial up for the innovation in this chain? I mean, considering gene-edited microbes to enhance the efficacy of such, because sometimes it's borderlining you want to see the feed conversion ratio of something substantial. And by regulating the mechanisms in the microbiome, you can actually achieve that. But it requires new technology like gene editing, cisgenesis, things that would normally be acceptable in the system. Any reflections on that?
Do you mean gene editing in feed additives and ingredients, or gene editing of the animals? In the additives, okay.
If you don't mind. Because it was asked in an earlier session that was in, do we have a concern that when we start to apply all these new technologies, that it's going to turn people off to food?
Yep.
So what's the plus and what's the minus?
That's what I wanted to talk about. Waiting for the science to go, look, I invented the solution. If a consumer doesn't accept it, it is not a solution. So starting early in the education, the outreach, the understanding, the shared, this is what we're doing, the transparency of it, and the benefit for you, consumer. I come from the state where the first GMO product was a square tomato, so it would ship longer and provide more profit for a farmer. That is not the way to have a consumer have great trust and credibility in what you're doing. This is very important. We have to keep who we're talking to in mind from day one.
Anyone else want to answer that? Yeah. Next question.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma DeBelko from Indiana University. Thank you for your time today. I'm really focusing in my research on the Global Methane Pledge, so this is a little bit broader than the past question, but how has the Global Methane Pledge maybe factored into your work? Are you aligning with it, especially as the Global Dairy Platform has supported the Global Methane Pledge? How has that factored into your work?
Can I just say California passed its law before there was a methane pledge, and we want to be a helpful player with others, including a new additional pledge that was announced at the beginning of this COP with subnationals to make sure that we're all sharing information and learning together.
Maybe a bit of a question for the others as well is one of the things that we have to be careful of, I think, is how many layers of pledges we have. Right? So all of our sectors, all of our companies, all of our countries have different levels of pledges. Do we have the right ones? Do we have too many? Do we have too few? do you have a sense of where that sits?
That's a very good question. And one of the reasons that American Feed Industry Association is a supporter of the methane pledge, and we're working with our partners to help them fulfill their goals and objectives. So what comes out, what a feed mill does is almost irrelevant. It's more about what does that product that it is creating help do within the supply chain. So our objective is not to create our own pledge and meet that, but to help the rest of the industry meet the pledges that they're making, such as the dairy industry.
Josefina?
No, in our case, yeah, we have made a commitment through the goal, and of course, where we commit to 30% reduction going to climate neutrality. So, of course, with that commitment, we try to work and identify which are the areas where they can align also with the methane pledge. And depends on the country, there are different strategies, and so, but yeah, we are fully aligned.
Mr. Cardozo?
Well, in case of Paraguay, we are not aligned to the Global Methane Pledge because this is a really important sector for our economy. It represents the 20% of exports of our country, and it has an impact of 12% in our GDP. So this is a robust sector that if we don't communicate well to them what are our commitments, we don't create the synergies with them to get committed to these compromises. So for Paraguay, it's still not clear how to achieve 30% reductions on methane by 2030. But we are really aligned with the sustainability and the compromises with the climate action. As I say, we have just 0.1% in total GHG emissions, and we are compromised to reduce 20% of those emissions by 2030. So the Global Methane Pledge will represent an additional effort for Paraguay to reduce methane. And for that, we will need a lot of help and support of the international cooperation. So before we, as a country and as a ministry, accept this compromise, we have to build an action plan first to be reliable to all the consumers and also the farmers about this national compromise and how much cost will represent for them and for our economy. So this is what is happening in Paraguay right now.
Thank you for the answer, Niana. You want to?
No, I just want to add that also sometimes we try to keep the conversation differently to farmers or to certain people, because also you can also decrease emissions by being more efficient, by using the right genetics. So sometimes let's not focus always the conversation on carbon, on methane. So which are the practices, like with better animal welfare and better animal health, you are already kind of decreasing the emissions and methane. So we try also sometimes to say, okay, let's not always focus on that conversation, because the other practices you're also contributing.
No regrets activities that a farmer can understand and benefit
Exactly.
from. One more very quick question in the back we have here. Rory?
Thank you. And it's great to see that we've got beef and dairy on the same panel. And we work quite well at the global level with U.S. Dairy Export Council and the Global Dairy Platform, Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. We work quite well together. And just as Josefina was saying, a lot of the practices at farm level are things we already know about. These are not brand new technologies. Better breeding, better husbandry, better health. These will have an enormous impact. And in fact, if you look at the couple of reports FAO has put out during COP, both of them really emphasize those things that we can already do. And I'd love to see more collaboration at the producer level in all the countries where we've got both beef and dairy. Beef genetics on dairy cows. It's a huge win for both industries. We should be really making more use of that. And I was wondering if anybody's got an opinion on how we can deepen that collaboration, not just at this global level where we're sitting, but right down to the individual producers.
Maybe Alex, because you mentioned earlier dairy plays across all of these spaces. Is there more we can do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, not to be generationalist, but I think, I think my generation and like these next generations are a lot better attuned to that, and I think they see that very clearly. That, you know, I am in the dairy and the beef industry, and I think just as you mentioned, like the beef on dairy and the potential that that has for, you know, good sustainability stories and good just stewardship of what we have as land and resources. And I think the beef side of the business is seeing that. And I think we are more and more appreciating each other as industries, and producers I think, are starting to be more and more aligned with that. So I think there's good hope that that's going to continue to blossom.
Thanks for your answer, Mr. Young Whippersnapper. I've got one more question for the panelists, and then we'll close it out here, I think, as we run out of time. And my question is, based on all this good conversation, all the good work we're doing, all the understanding that in order for us to go big enough, smart enough, fast enough to be the hero, we have to work together. You're all back in this room 5 years from now, COP33. We're staring down the targets the world has put in place for 2030. What's the story for livestock? What are we telling people? Have we achieved hero status? Have we driven these kind of benefits and changes? Are we still having the same conversations amongst ourselves? So give me your shortest answer on what it looks like at COP 2033, and I'll start with you, Constance, and work back.
Of course you are. Yeah, no, I think in at COP 33, we're going to be talking about, have a much better understanding of what's happening now within the industry. What are we currently doing that is creating some sustainable wins, some sustainability wins? I think we're going to have a lot more information sharing, and we're going to be taking some of those practices across the board. We're going to understand where some of our opportunities are to make a real change. I do think we'll be having some of the same conversations depending on what sector we're looking at. This is not going to be a journey that the entire sector takes at the same pace. We're going to see some sectors move much more quickly than others, but I think we'll have some real progress to show because, quite frankly, we already have the tools in the toolbox to show real progress. These other things that are coming along are going to be the ways that we're really going to become a net sink and a true solution to the climate challenge.
Josefina.
We always talk about continuous improvement, so it's not that once we get there, we are done. So I think there's always more to do better. So there are different areas that we can approach. So I think that's one. We always discover new things that we can do better. But also I think I would like maybe to be in 5 years, more having like this kind of, not having only the climate discussion. You have also the biodiversity discussions. We also now we're talking about livelihood, social discussion, and they're all related to each other. So I think once we get more mature on this discussion, we realize, or health, like animal health is very important. So I hope that by that time we understand how are they all interrelated with each other, and with just making progress on one, you influence all the others. So I hope we don't have only a climate COP. But
yeah, perfect. Alex?
You know, I asked my uncle years ago, who's kind of a tree expert, and I said, Uncle Mike, when's the best time to plant a tree? Because I wanted to do some work in the yard. And he said 20 years ago, and then laughed because I walked right into his little trap. So I hope in 10 years that we're looking, in the time span, I hope we're saying that agriculture really came together as a system and moved forward because I'm going to go on a wild limb and say things are going to be more busy. Things are going to be more distracting. A lot more things are going to be going on in the future than they are today. There's going to be a lot more excuses on why we haven't did things. I mean, every time you look back 4 or 5 years, think, man, how calm was life 4 or 5 years ago? It's going to be no different, I think. So I think the impetus is on doing the work now, and doing the hard work for the future today is going to pay off tomorrow instead of just trying to survive today.
Perfect. Minister.
To add some other perspective of what the colleagues were saying, I expect for the 2030 that agriculture is constituted as a sustainable practice in the whole system. And regarding to the negotiation here and the COP and for the future COPs, I expect that in the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on implementation of climate action on agriculture and food security, we can make progress. And we can keep agriculture being part of the COP agenda. We have to remain that agriculture is the only sectorial item under this agenda, and we have a huge opportunity to be in a group to talk with experts on agriculture about how the agriculture have to contribute to the or has to contribute to the climate, or can contribute against the climate change. So that is our expectation as Paraguay, and also we consider, and also we consider that I was okay.
You had a great answer already. You had a great answer already.
I supposed to have a bigger answer because, as I say, I work at the General Directorate of Planning, and I have big bosses from the Vice Ministry of Livestock. So I hope I clear the answer as a negotiator in agriculture. That is our big expectation for other COPs.
Yeah, indeed.
So thank you.
Madam Secretary.
Food brings us together. It's the one thing that I think we can come together around. And I think 5 years is a short term. I mean, first of all, I don't know that we need a COP every year, but I'm glad we're doing stock taking this time. I think every 10 years would be a more adequate way of doing this. But what I would say is in 5 years, if I had the vision play out the way I would love for it to, there would be multiple headlines coming out of the next COP in that year. Farmers and ranchers are leading on solutions, and they're feeding us very well, and they're doing it in the most responsible way because of the tools that have been made available to us and the partners that we've created to help make that happen.
Have that bacon cheeseburger, right?
It's back to the very beginning of the comments. The stories matter, and we need to understand the story we need to be telling in 5 years to get there. We are not going to get there if we all stay in our boxes and hope in the end all the pieces match. We have to think about that story. I'm going to close it by going to our farmer on the panel and let you have the last word. And there's a couple of things I'd be curious about. You're going to go home, talk to Uncle Mike about the trees, convince him you didn't have a tan line from being on the beach.
Yeah.
And you're going to explain what happened. And the two questions I have are, what do you tell them happened at COP? And can you tell them in a language that relates? Because we keep talking about farmers, but it's almost like Jackie Klippenside made this comment to me the other day, where we're trying to find the words up here and then trying to see if they make sense to a farmer instead of listening to the farmers and then making the language make sense for them. So what are you going to tell them? And can you tell them in a way that's going to make them excited and understand?
Yeah, I think what I usually tell them after events like this, and COP is my first COP, so this is kind of on steroids, but it's that the world is coming around to our way of thinking, and when they finally get their act together, they're going to help us. And I think that's what we need to be bracing them for, that there are people that are looking to help us be better stewards, more efficient, and feed the world, which, as the Secretary laid out, is what we want to do. And as the rest of society figures out that those are the priorities that need to be at the heart of everyone, then they're going to figure out ways to continue to help us improve with that.
Fantastic. Great way to end. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, everybody, for coming.